I'd like to introduce Charles Lerner. He's the Executive Director of At the Crossroads. He's been in his post for just over a year now, and he will open us up with some remarks. Take it away, Charles.
Thank you, Mari. I know the technical difficulties is very frustrating, so thank you for your patience, and thank you for everybody that's joining us, your patience as well. I just want to say thank you for joining us. And really tonight, as some of you already know, we had a big event planned a couple weeks ago that we were unable to have. And one of the major motivations of that event for us was that ATC is intent on getting bigger and bolder and taking more leadership in really addressing a humanitarian crisis that is only getting more and more dire, and we feel like we need our community to be in there with us. And so tonight is just one small step in keeping you engaged, hearing from you, learning from you, and asking for your commitment to stay engaged with us so that we can really create large-scale change. And I do believe we can do it if we mobilize the right people in the right way and we persist until we get it done. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Great, thank you, Charles. So I'm just going to invite everybody to also just introduce themselves really briefly with your name and what you do at ATC and maybe how long you've been there, and then we'll get the conversation started, starting with Kia.
Cool. Well, my name's Kia. I am a supportive services counselor at the Crossroads. I've been at ATC, it's coming on 2 years now. I think in June it'll be 2 years. It's exciting. And yeah.
How about D?
Hi, my name's Demaria Miller. You can call me D. I'm program manager for At the Crossroads, and I've been on board 5 years in July.
And Abby?
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby. I'm a supportive services counselor as well with Kia, and I've been with At the Crossroads for 3.5 years, and I use she, her, hers pronouns.
Thank you all. So we're going to get started tonight. I know something that's on a lot of people's minds is how is COVID-19 affecting people who are experiencing homelessness? I'm sure that some of you live in the Bay Area and have seen it firsthand, the difference on the streets. But I wanted to really open it up and hear from our program staff about what their experiences are. They're out on the streets a couple nights a week, bringing supplies and counseling services directly to folks where they're at. We're also meeting with clients in our office. So I'm curious just to hear from you guys, what is some of the work that you've done at ATC in the last week that you never imagined you would do before?
I never thought I'd have so many conversations around hand sanitizer in my life, like the scarcity of it, how to get it, making dedicated asks for it. A huge thing has been, and that's kind of like indicative of how we've had to shift priorities in need and preparation of the pandemic as well. It's trying to figure out what things we can get to our clients as soon as possible, what we can do to play our part in trying to minimize risk, and just trying to provide opportunity and change services to kind of adapt to what's going on.
Yeah, I think that another thing in regards to like safety and like security is I never imagined how much like all the PPE equipment would affect counseling. Whenever we meet with clients, we have gloves, masks. On outreach, we wear goggles. We're 6 feet apart. In the in-office meetings are like not really in, like the client is outside and the door is open and there's a table in between us. So there's a lot of separation there, which really it feels like it can hinder counseling a lot of the times. Like you can't really like emote as much when you're wearing a mask. And it's just like a lot of distance. And as well, like the clients are also like outside. So it's really hard to like, open up and like let us know how they're really doing when like we're like, out in the open,
Yeah, I'd say the masks and the distance definitely stand out to me. But another thing I've been doing more the past 2 weeks is I swear I'm looking up when the DMV, the Social Security Office, a lot of resources because folks are in need of supplies and resources right now, but hours are different, places are closed. So a lot of time is spent because it changes, trying to figure out that information and get it to clients, especially around getting IDs and getting access to services like benefits like CalFresh, stuff like that.
Thank you all. I know that there definitely have been some changes visible on the streets. I know today it was in the last week, it was reported by the city that tents in the Tenderloin have gone up by 285%, which I think is a very visible manifestation of people's experience of what's going on, not having shelter, not having access to services, things being closed, things being changed. But I am curious if you all could speak a little bit to just some of the experiences that our clients have been having as they're trying to navigate getting what they need, getting access to things, trying to get shelter if they're unsheltered. Just what is people's experience like from the work that you all are doing?
I think in general, like a lot of what I'm seeing is like a lot of our clients like income options are on pause right now, and in general, like it's a lot more difficult to get in touch with like the Social Security office, like getting in touch with, like it's just a lot more difficult to get in touch with people. And like I've been noticing a lot of like a runaround, like we're trying to call people and they're closed, and then so it's like really like in terms of resources, there's just like a lot of a big like barrier in terms of like things are closed, or we're not sure if things are closed or open and what their times are even. So that's been like really a confusing thing to like navigate.
Yeah, building off what Kia said, it sounds like a minute thing, but when you don't have a smartphone, like online options are really, really difficult. So when you're trying to access any of those services, and it's like great, they're all online, but if you don't have a smartphone, it is super frustrating and super alienating because the offices are physically closed.
Yeah, and I think a huge thing is our clients are facing the same problems we're all facing in terms of things are less convenient. There's an economic strain, people participating in whatever economies they're participating in that might slow down. I think the options you have to make money are completely dried up. And I think a big thing is problems that have already existed for our clients are just kind of being magnified by the pandemic as well. The feeling of isolation, I think, is even more so than ever because of social distancing. And then also in terms of resources, it's already an uphill battle to get clients resources and to be able to bring these things, and then kind of what the counselors were talking about. And it's even harder to know what's open. It's even harder to go to the DMV now. Things that have already been barriers are kind of even more so now. And yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm getting some audience questions, so that's exciting. Thank you all. Please keep sending in your questions. This is similar, it's in a similar vein, but I know that people, there's a couple of questions about this. People have been curious about, they've heard about the hotels opening up and hotel rooms being available to people. And they've also heard about kind of camping sites and the RV sites. And so I'm just curious, I know that maybe we don't have exact data or numbers, but if you've heard of clients having success accessing those services, or if the population we're working with has not, has had more difficulty accessing it, what is it really like on the streets right now in terms of those kinds of new COVID related services?
I think with the hotels, it was talk about the hotels immediately when this all started, but they were given to a very like select few. And so a lot of people were asking us about them, but they weren't eligible for them, even though they were outside. And then slowly every day, it feels like it changes that more and more people. So someone may have been rejected a week ago, who has asthma, is living outside, but is not within the age range. But then maybe this week, he was accepted. And so it's kind of what we were talking about before, that things are constantly changing, and trying to keep up to date with that. And from what I've heard from clients is that it takes advocacy to get into a hotel. It's not like you can't just kind of like walk up and access it. It takes a provider, it takes an advocate to help you get in there.
And just to say how unfortunate that is.
Yeah,
that
it's not
people,
right at all. Like you hear, this is all we're hearing about in the media, is these hotel rooms. And it's not like a snap your fingers. It's not, people that really need them are not getting access to them.
Right.
And then I think it's important to also realize that not everything is one size fits all. I can think of some people I've heard from that have great experiences in the hotel, and it fits that need completely. And then I think I've seen it with other people where it's felt more restrictive, or it's felt a little bit more intrusive than what they would have liked. And I do think right now a lot of people are doing the best they can, including the city, in providing its options.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with the pandemic like this is that the rules seem to keep changing, as Abby alluded to earlier. And as an organization and as a program, I think we try to be as proactive as possible and anticipate need and meet clients where they're at, while the terms of this pandemic and the terms of these criteria constantly shifting kind of means that we've been on our heels a little bit more.
That makes sense. I've got another audience question if y'all are game.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So somebody is wondering, they're asking about, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, sorry. Asking about how ATC is organizing with other organizations during this time. They're specifically asking about how we're organizing to address housing issues in and out of the Tenderloin during the pandemic, but just kind of raising the point that organizing with different organizations is hard to do virtually. So I'm just curious to hear from you all about how we've been working with other organizations in this time, what kind of collaboration is happening.
I can kick off a couple things and then just kind of see if you all want to fill in the blanks. I'll give like a bare bones. In terms of collaboration, I will agree with the question. It is extremely difficult with this pandemic and actual having physical collaboration. But I think things that we are doing is we all participate in a bunch of provider calls that kind of talk about updates and keeping, Abby mentioned that the hotel criteria is changing, but we try to stay completely on top of what's going on with the news and what standards are changing and what hours are changing in terms of both city services and also just something as simple as when is Target going to be open on Memorial Day. I've been in calls with different organizations, and I know some other members of the organization have as well, just maybe getting feedback on how other people are running their programs, and maybe doing consultation with other programs on how they're approaching their client work. And while we may not let what other people are doing dictate what we do, we've let it kind of, while also giving our own feedback, we've kind of let it like help shape our ideas and our approach to being as client-centered as possible.
I just want to add that I think as well that the nonprofit sector, one of my biggest challenges to the sector is often to get out of silos and to work in a more coordinated way, to reduce duplication of services, to ensure that we're communicating with one another to make, if a client may have a need that we can address, that we know where to go. And so I do see a lot of non-profit professionals and city, quite frankly, even public-private partnerships where I've even had the evening calls with people just to be an emotional support for folks who are doing this work, which I think is so important, because one of the for lack of a better way of putting it, casualties of this could be the well-being of the people who are tasked to help our most vulnerable. And if we're not very thoughtful of how we support one another through that process, we're not going to have helpers that are in the place to help the very people that we need to be helping. So I do see a lot of the offline encouragement and support of each other, and then even just asking, what are you all doing right now, because there's no precedence for this. Right now, nonprofit leaders are trying to make decisions about how to continue to get support out onto the streets and to the most vulnerable within our community, while also making sure that they hopefully put precautions in place to keep their staff healthy. And that is just something that we're not used to doing at this level.
Definitely. I realize I did want to take a step back, because I don't know if people are watching who maybe don't know how our services have changed and what kind of services we're offering right now. So I think just taking a step back, if y'all could address that a little bit, just kind of speak to what services we're offering on the streets and why.
Let's see, so we're still able to do outreach. Kia mentioned it earlier that we have a lot of PPE, we have goggles, masks, gloves, and we're able to still hand out supplies. Some of the most requested and things that people are really in need of right now are masks, hand sanitizer, and but besides that, we still give out socks and snacks, tissues, other hygiene supplies, and we also try to, and we have these all in pre-packed like sanitary bags. And within those bags, we're able to put in information, updates from the city and in general about COVID, about what it is, what is a shelter in place mean, or what is required when you're entering a building. That's what outreach is looking like right now. We're still seeing a lot of folks out there, and it's been really nice to still see them and be out there. So I want to talk about the during the day stuff we do.
Sure, yeah. So we're open in the daytime as well, but we work in terms of like our one-to-one meetings, they look a little bit different. So instead of us being able to go to a client or to meet them at like a Starbucks or whatever, they have to come to us, to our office, and we meet them at the door, and there's 6 feet of distance between us. And we're still able to give, like we have like our food pantry still in the office, so we're still able to give food, and like we do like case management stuff over the phone, even in person, like with the 6 feet of distance, which makes it a little complicated, but we're making it work. So yeah, we're doing like a lot of phone counseling, and our in-person meetings just look a little bit different because there's like 6 feet of distance and we're meeting like in front of the door.
And I just want to, a lot of thought and conversation has gone into everything that Kia and Abby described in order to both keep our clients as safe as possible and make sure that we're not, we're creating a space that is clean and accessible to people, but also to keep our staff safe. That's really important, because if we're unable to do the work that we do, then that's one less resource for people on the streets. So just thank you all for explaining that. Did you have anything to add, Dee?
No, I think the Kia and Abby covered it.
Cool. So I have another audience question here, and it's just kind of wanting for us to think about or wondering about the future of our work and the work on the streets. And so as the unemployment numbers rise, I think we're kind of sitting at the beginning of potentially a longer crisis. We don't necessarily know, but people are curious to hear about whether we think that this will create increased demand for the resources that we provide. They were kind of thinking about food banks and how the demand for food banks has gone up. And so just wanting to think a little bit about the future, what kind of impacts do you think that the current health crisis we're in, but also the economic downturn that we're in, will have on the people that we support?
Well, I think the data seems to suggest that we could be looking at a 20 to 40% increase in those who are experiencing housing instability and or homelessness. And if you think about that, and it is no laughing matter, obviously, but when you think about that, how absurd that would potentially be, considering that this is the most pervasive social challenge that we have failed to adequately address in this region or this area, really as a country, but in the Bay Area, to think that we now are just going to have that challenge even magnified more. And so that, really falls, and we knew this even before COVID, which is why ATC has spent the last 12 months leveraging, by the way, amazing work that the organization's been doing for 2 decades, through the vision of an amazing founding executive director, Rob, who many on the phone probably know. We really wanted to leverage that history and get bigger and bolder and pushier, and louder about this issue. And so it seems to me like we really got to build a movement, which is, I know we'll talk about the pledge a little bit later, but we really need to build a movement. And really, you can be part of the movement just simply sending an email, maybe donating some in-kind goods, or supplies, just educating yourself and communicating with others all the way through making, financial contributions. So I don't know necessarily what the solution is. I certainly we'll talk about some of the values that I think need to drive our solutions. But we're all going to have to get into this together, in a real meaningful way, in an active way.
Thanks, Charles. Pretty soon I want to pivot to talking about exactly that, sort of changes that at the Crossroads sees important for the Bay Area, but also important for our organization. But real quick, there was another question that just had a fun flavor, so I want to throw it out. Someone was asking if we are seeing sort of any areas of hope. So any changes that have happened in this time that we know is incredibly stressful and has been really unprecedented. But is there anything that you've experienced in the last couple months that maybe gives you a little bit of hope for changes that could take place that would be positive?
I think I see a lot of people rallying around each other during this time. I see community, I see people caring for each other, or people have reached out to us, both myself on a personal level, but also the organization, to see how we're doing, to ask what we need. And I think there's a lot of kindness that's kind of happening. And I'm hoping that we keep that same energy moving forward, as well. I also think it's tragic, more than it is hopeful, but I do see hope in it. I think this kind of shows how arbitrary a lot of things we've done in the past are. This pandemic has shown that, you mentioned campers and you mentioned hotels. It's shown that these things have always been possible. We mentioned raising benefits for people during COVID. We mentioned these things. I think it's shown how arbitrary poverty has kind of been to the level that it is, as Charles said, in the country, but talking about the Bay Area specifically as well. We are able to help people. There are options out there. And if we want people to have the choice of not being outside, we're able to create that choice, and we're able to give people those options and respect their autonomy and give them meaningful wages and pay our essential staff. And I think these are all things that are possible. And I hope that it's harder to go back to the argument that it's not, or that it's not important after this, because we're really as strong as our most vulnerable citizen. And this kind of shows how interconnected we are.
A more like small one, which I'm sure everyone noticed, is that like for the past few months, people, when they're asking how you're doing, they really mean it. It's not like a, how are you doing? It's like a, how are you doing? And there's kind of a moment, I feel like, between people a lot more, and it means something a little different because people are kind of recognize, like, being more empathetic during this time.
Yeah, thank you. I think to what really is highlighted for me, based on what y'all are saying, is just how COVID-19 is really, it's the tip of the iceberg. It's making apparent a lot of things that have been sort of systemically issues in our area for a really long time. And so it's just really bringing them to the light, even though they've been there. And so I think something that at the Crossroads is really mulling over in this time is, what are the changes that we need to make as an organization? Where do we need to plug in to bring about the changes that the Bay Area really needs in order to address what we see as a humanitarian crisis? So right now, at the Crossroads has launched what we're calling our Committed to Change pledge. We're inviting people from our community to join us in committing to change. And I'm going to open it up to Charles to just kind of talk to you about what that means, why it's important, and kind of why now.
Sure, and I started, maybe I prematurely talked about it a few minutes ago, but excuse me, my hearing is, so really the Committed to Change pledge is a gesture for our supporters to make, just to kind of send a message, we're here with you, because we can you hear me?
You're good now.
Oh, good. Okay, sorry. Of course, the one time I have unstable internet connection is when you ask me to speak about the Committed to Change pledge. So anyway, you know, we want to build a community, and I know it sounds a little maybe strange or I don't know, utopian, but I really see our supporters as part of our circle, our friend circle, our family, and I want people on the phone who have taken time to be here tonight, clearly are already engaged or want to be engaged. But I want to build that community. I want to build that circle, and I want to engage people. And I want to, I want, or you know, on behalf of ATC, like we want to, you know, send a message that you don't have to passively sit idle and watch what's happening around you happen. And you don't have to necessarily be in it every day, but even a small gesture makes a big difference. I'll tell you, I love when people send me emails and just give me an idea or say something what's as simple as, have you thought about doing your donation receipts online as opposed to mailing in letters? Have you thought about changing this on your website? Even those gestures are really important to us, because it says that, you know, that we're cared about, that people have our back. And so that's really what the Committed to Change pledge is about, is really building that community and engaging the community in a really meaningful way, as I said earlier. Now, if you commit to the pledge, we are going to let you know the truth, and we're going to let you know what's happening internally at the organization, where we're struggling, where we need help. And we're also going to, you know, tell you the truth as we see it about what we're witnessing and what we think needs to happen to create larger macro level change. So that's how I would sort of sum up the pledge, Mari. I don't know if you had any other things you wanted to say to chime in.
Definitely. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, so it's really, we pulled it down to 3 things that you could do, and you're already doing one right now. So the first one is learning about the issues, which you're doing today, and we're so glad to have you here. We're really hoping to have you at our events, that you can follow us and engage with us either on social media or over email. We're also asking people to raise your voice. So share these ideas with your friends, share your questions and ideas with us. Sort of show up and support our cause. We'll definitely have more ways to do this down the line. So we're just hoping that we can kind of engage you and that you'll join us as more opportunities materialize. And then the third one is sharing your resources. So Charles mentioned sharing in-kind donations, you know, donations of warm clothing that's newer, donations of food and other hygiene items really goes a long way. But also donating resources and money is really big, and sharing your community with us. So all of those are really important ways. There's lots of ways to plug in. I've dropped the link to Commit to Change onto our Facebook just beneath this video, but you'll definitely be hearing from us about it over the next month. So I hope that you can check it out and join us. And now I want to talk a little bit hear from our staff about, you know, why now, why change, and hear what kind of changes you think that we need to make to the way that the Bay Area addresses homelessness. I'm going to open it up.
I guess generally the way that kind of the Bay Area views homelessness, like what I'd want to see changed is like that people have to behave a certain way, have a certain history, or like be like worthy in some way of housing. Like just like that basic kind of like fundamental idea of like everyone being worthy of housing, rather than just like, you know, you have to do this and have all these like kind of restrictions before you're deemed like you've deserved it, like you've earned it, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a few things about homelessness in the Bay Area that I've been thinking about is that there is an answer to it, and it's housing. It's safe, supportive, flexible, affordable housing can solve homelessness. There is a solution, but I think instead of the question, people always want to ask, how much does it cost to fix homelessness? How much does it cost to build a new navigation center? How much does it cost to do this? Why aren't I seeing, why are there still people outside? Instead of taking the approach of, how do we support folks humanely, respectfully, and equitably? And however long that takes, we're in it. And I think that that's the mindset that needs to change in the Bay Area around homelessness.
I feel that there's a huge lack of empathy in the Bay Area around this subject. When you mention what you have to see from people experiencing houselessness on the street, and without having to think about, how do you think people feel having to do these things in public? How do you think people feel having to live in an area where, for most of their peers, it's as if they've been stripped of their humanity? You have a bunch of people that are participating in different street economies for survival and out of necessity and because of lack of opportunity. And they're viewed as criminals or not contributing to society. And I think that's a huge problem. I also think, speaking of which, the Bay Area, Abby mentioned it, people need housing. I don't think it's complicated. I don't think it's hard. I think people need housing, and people need to feel safe in that housing, and people need opportunity. I think it's absurd that we have as much wealth as we have, especially in San Francisco, and people that have been born in this city and people that are from the city have to live in ways that they don't feel is right. And I think anyone could look at it and tell that it's not fair. People need to be given opportunity, and people need to be given choices.
You know, one of the things I'll just say is, to piggyback off what everybody else has said, is that I understand the frustration that those that are housed, that very likely have the resources they need to have food security and housing security and healthcare, which, by the way, ATC's position is that all three of those should be entitlements, that there should be no qualifications or conditions placed on people to have those things, as Kia said. And really, when we talk about ATC's advocacy in the future, it's just hitting home that point over and over and over again. But I understand why people are frustrated. And I think, I do think there's a lack of empathy, but I also think that there's something else underlying the response of people in the Bay Area around this issue. And I don't know if it's only a lack of empathy. It is a sense of desensitization of people who are living potentially outside, who are dying outside. And we know that's happening. And I think it's a really hard thing to sit with, to witness how people are struggling and in some cases dying because of that struggle. And we feel disempowered and we don't know what to do. So we shut down. And then part of shutting down is to become irritated with the problem, the conditions in which people live that we have not fixed, right? So we just get frustrated with certain things, and that's not going to solve this issue. And again, this is part of the reason why we're doing the pledge and the Committed to Change pledge, is because we got to move more people within our community out of this place of desensitization and frustration and hopelessness, and move them to action if we're gonna solve this.
One thing I think that we've been discussing at ATC is, what would it look like? How would the approach shift if we were, as a region, as a city, to view housing as a human right, healthcare as a human right? How would that change the approach that we have for addressing homelessness and the surrounding issues? It's a hard one.
Is the question, to clarify, it's how would the Bay Area look if we made the shifts that we were talking about?
That would work too, but I think also just thinking about how we approach it now with that not as a shared value. What would that, if we had that as a shared value as providers, as city agencies, etc., what would shift about the way that we work on to tackle the issues?
Okay, I see. Kia mentioned this earlier, I believe, that a lot of things seem as if they're privileges as opposed to rights. And I think Charles touched on that too. If we came from the perspective that housing, healthcare, that pretty much these essential needs are in fact essential and not privileged and not a measure of how worthy you are in society, it would save us a lot of the work we have to do. So much of the work, I don't want to speak for the counseling team as a whole, but I'll speak from my experience as a counselor. It's navigating systems and convincing people that our clients are worthy of something. So much of my work, even as program manager, is convincing people that clients are worthy of things, that people need these things. It's not a matter of want. And I think if we come from the perspective that these things are essential needs, we get to spend more energy advocating. We get to spend more energy helping clients thrive rather than simply survive. And in some cases, people don't survive, as Charles mentioned. People are dying on the streets. It's a serious issue. And if we come at it from the same, we can actually start talking about self-actualization. We can start talking about people's actual goals. We can talk about people's wants. We can keep families together. We can keep people happy. We can have people thriving and doing and contributing in the ways that they want to contribute and in the ways that they want to feel seen, as opposed to being forced in boxes.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively, mostly.
Yeah, I think if housing was considered a human right, and same with other things, the accessibility and the urgency would just be different. We have clients now that maybe are, they do an interview, they go to a shelter, they do this, and this process to get housing can take over a year. And you're asking folks to wait over a year who are in day-to-day survival to be patient for a room. And a lot of times people lose sight of their end goal because they have other shit or stuff to deal with, in their day-to-day life, and having to go to interviews and check up, like all these things. It's hard to maintain when you're worrying about surviving. And I think that if it was a human right, then there would be more urgency and there'd be more housing so that people wouldn't have to wait that long for a room to open up.
Yeah, I think the way that it is right now in terms of like coordinated entry, which is like the program that like the city kind of funnels in a lot of like the rapid rehousing and things like that interview process and like getting considered to be like priority status, like that kind of, even like that vocabulary of being like your priority status, you answer these questions in a certain way, and now that you're now priority and we're gonna house you, whatever. I think that was like one specific thing that could like potentially change if we change our mindsets, and like moving forward with like anyone that needs housing is a priority status, rather than like if you answer these interview questions a certain way, now you're priority. If you don't, you're not priority, and you don't get helped.
And I'm sorry, one more thing. Mm-hmm. I cannot count how many times I've had to talk to people in establishments that work consistently with our population. Have I had to advocate that people need to not get kicked out of housing? The fact that in some cases I'm working with clients experiencing severe mental health struggles and countless barriers, and in actual reality that the chances of them being alive once they leave housing will plummet drastically. And the fact that more times than I can count in the 5 years I've been here, that I've had to talk to people in similar positions as myself and explain why someone needs housing and why they need us to advocate is astounding to me. the fact that we have to come from an angle where I have to convince someone that this person shouldn't get kicked out of supportive housing.
Definitely. Thank you all. Those are some really thoughtful answers. I think, let's see, we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but I want to throw in one more audience question. So we have, this question is around the stigma around homelessness. And it says, the stigma of being homeless needs to change, but how? So I am curious if anybody has ideas about how that might shift, that narrative might shift culturally. I think it feels important.
Well, I think we need to reframe what homelessness is, and that, you know, that it really is symbolic, or the ideology of homelessness is so complex, and there are so many unaddressed social issues that are the cause of why people are in various positions in life. And I always say that, you know, where people are at in life is a combination of, and a lot of focus on their choices, right? But that's actually just a small part of, or small percentage of, why people are in the position they're in. It's about opportunity, it's about history, it's about the legacy of previous experiences. And if, as a country, we acknowledge, I'd like to think we would acknowledge that that we have particular groups that are marginalized in our country, and have been throughout history, and that has an impact. That we have had income inequality, and quite frankly, the wealth gap is only increasing. That leads to homelessness. That we have people that have mental health challenges that they don't have the support that they need, or substance abuse or addiction, and that we don't have the resources we need for people around those things. So I guess it's really going beyond looking, and I know this is sort of a tangent, and maybe doesn't exactly answer your question, Mari, but if we go beyond who the human being, like what we see aesthetically or on the surface with human beings, and challenge ourselves to dig a lot deeper and figure out what else is going on there, and really how all the contributing factors that have led to people having that just being one experience of many that they have. Homelessness and experiencing housing instability or homelessness is just one aspect of that person's life. Maybe we can kind of get beyond the homelessness and start looking at really the issues that we should be looking at.
Yeah, I think like what it takes to change is just like a movement, like a community of people. I think that's what it takes to change in general, like change societies in general. It's just like communities and people gathering, and like Charles is mentioning, like people are feeling like kind of like irritated and fed up, and like there's nothing that they can do, you know. But I think that this is like something that you can do, is like something tangible. Like it's like get educated and educate others, you know, that like the resources are there. I think a lot of maybe what people are thinking is like, we don't have the money, or we don't have the, like everything that we need to like solve homeless, we have it all, it's all available, you know. So I think the main thing is just like getting people like educated and informed, and like building upon that to make a community like of people to like push forward change.
A thing I say often, and it has many applications for me, is I believe everybody is entitled to a safe space and care. And I think the paradox to that is I don't think anyone's obligated to give it, which is funny. And that's kind of why I choose to be in this field. I think in order to get rid of the stigma, what we really need is simply for people to educate themselves, like Kia said, and to care and to participate in their community when they can. And I think it's completely fine for people to not have capacity to do so. I think it's a big ask, and I think holding a lot of weight is hard, and it doesn't get any easier in this world. But I think on the end of that, you have organizations like at the Crossroads, you have other places that are doing this work. And I think that you support people in your lives that are doing this work. I think you support people professionally and personally that do this work. And I think really what you provide is empathy. I think when you see someone, your reaction, suffering, your reaction should never be one of disgust. It should be, at the very least, acknowledging someone's struggle. And I think that that goes a huge way.
Thank you all. I'm aware of time, and I just want to see if anybody has any like last thoughts, things they wanted to say but didn't get to, closing remarks.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Kia said.
Thanks.
The resources are there. I know, and I'm not a businessman, and I'm not, and I know the master plan that we need is probably much more complicated than I know. But I think the first step is for our city to make a commitment to these entitlements that we've talked about on the phone, create the strategy, and basically make the promise and say, here's what it's going to take, and we're going to have to find the money, but it's out there. Let's bring people together. So we've seen that with COVID. A lot of money has come into a COVID response, as well as a lot of previously unknown housing options have become available too over the last 3 months, where we're getting a lot more people housed. So as Kia said, the resources are there. Let's not pretend like they're not there. It's just, do we have the will? Do we have the strategy? And do we stand at the table or sit at the table together long enough to make it happen?
Yeah, I was gonna say for the stick, kind of like an ending thought, is something that At the Crossroads has been doing, which is like working more with the city and other organizations to show that another way is possible, that there's another way to treat our clients, or another way to treat the most vulnerable people. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing, especially like Sean and Demarie and Charles, like really taking a seat at the table and pointing out things that aren't right and speaking up. And I know that takes a lot of courage and change, and that's part of change, is having courage to do that.
Thank you. If no one has any other things they want to share, Kia, Demarie, any last thoughts? Then I will give it away to you, Charles, to close us out here.
Well, I think people have already heard a lot from me. So, but in closing, I just again want to say thank you. I'm just really proud. Thank you for the kind words, Abby. But and I'm so proud of our team. That's partly also why I want folks to engage with ATC more, because I think you'll just see how extraordinarily kind, smart, and a lot of wisdom amongst our team. And it's wonderful to be surrounded by that on a regular basis, and that's what gives me hope, is just to see the level of kindness and humanity that the people that I get to work with every day, now mostly remotely, but get to work with every day, exude. And we're just looking for more people like that. And we know a lot of our supporters are enormously giving and kind, and we want to have you be part of the process even more, because that's what feeds us. And so every donation you make, every email you send, every event you go to really sends us an important message and supports us in a really significant way. So I hope that you will be in touch. I hope you will never hesitate to send an email to me or somebody on the team and share your thoughts, ask the questions, going back to educating yourself. We will always take the time to answer those questions and respond. And this is just the beginning. And I hope that after tonight, you'll sign that pledge. You can do it anonymously or put your name behind it. We are looking for 1,000 pledges. We want our community to be 1,000 strong over the next few months. And so with that big of a community, I think we'll make a pretty big splash over the next year or two.
Thank you all so much. And thanks to those online who joined. I'm sorry we got started a little late. We will be posting this on YouTube, so folks who couldn't make it will be able to see it in a different fashion. And we're so stoked to have you. So thank you so much. We really hope that you'll join us. As Charles said, I would echo It's time to make a change in the Bay Area. It's time for us to build a Bay Area for all. To be transparent, ATC doesn't have all the answers, but we're really dedicated, and we're really approaching it with a lot of energy and effort, and we really are approaching it with the values that everybody deserves to, as Dee said, have a safe place to be. Everybody has the right to home and to healthcare and to opportunities. So commit to change without the Crossroads. The link is in our comments on Facebook, and we'll be sending it out over email as well. So if you're not on our email list, you can go to our website and get signed up, and you'll be hearing from us about how to stay involved. So thank you so much. Bye,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.